So in import valuation, as far as rules are concerned, how many rules we have already done? We have already done rule number 2, rule number 10, 11, and 12.
12.
These many rules we have already completed. We started with rule number 3, but that talks about subject to rule number 12. 12 is based on 11, and then subject to addition adjustment as per 10. So we started with 3. That's why we moved on 10, 11, 12. But after doing these 3 rules, now we can come and really do rule number 3. Okay. So now moving to rule number 3. Rule number 3, when does it apply? When does it apply? So for applicability of rule number 3, the most important factor is that there is a transaction price. If there is no transaction price, then rule number 3 does not apply. Okay. So rule number 3 is there is a transaction price, right? And that price is the sole consideration. Price is the sole consideration. This is important.
ये ट्रांजैक्शन प्राइस और ट्रांजैक्शन वैल्यू सर सेम है?
वैल्यू शब्द जब हम बात करते हैं तो वैल्यू इज रिलेटेड टू असेसेबल वैल्यू, राइट? प्राइस प्लस एडिशन एडजस्टमेंट, दैट बिकम्स द वैल्यू. That's why I'm using the term price. That there has to be a price, and that price is the sole consideration. Then only this rule is applicable, otherwise not. But subject to additions and adjustments as per rule number 10. So those are different things. In other than addition adjustment as per rule number 10, there shall not be any other consideration. So this is subject to additions and adjustments as per rule number 10. Right? So there is a transaction price, that price is the sole consideration, and then addition adjustment have to be done as per rule number 10. Then after that, there are 2 different situations given there. There are 2 different situations. Situation number 1, parties are not related. Parties are not related. So this is a condition under section 14 also, the parties shall not be related. What happens if the parties are related? That is the second part, where parties are related. Parties are related, right? Now you remember the statement that I made you, that whether the transaction is between related parties or non-related parties, the evaluation is always as per the rules. This is because here, if they are related, valuation as per rules. If those are not related, again valuation is as per the rules, right? So rules are always applicable for the purpose of valuation, whether parties are related or not related. Okay. If price is the sole consideration, that is valuation under rule number 3. If it is not, then rule number other rules are applicable. So here we have two situations in which rule number 3 applies, and for applicability of rule number 3, these are three basic conditions. Three basic conditions for applicability of rule number 3. First is there is a transaction price. Number 2, price is the sole consideration. Number 3, addition adjustment as per rule number 10 have to be done. Okay, so those addition adjustment, those cannot be omitted. Those are always there. Now, this is subject to rule number 12. Subject to rule 12. Now you understand the meaning of the subject to what is the meaning of rule number 12. So what it is saying, that if the transaction price declared under rule number 11 has not been rejected under rule number 12. So that's why two rules are applicable, right? So there is a declaration made under rule number 11 and that is not rejected under rule number 12. So that is the first line, subject to rule 12, that if the value declared under rule number 11 has been rejected, then valuation cannot be there under rule number 3. Is that point clear?
Yes.
Right. Then the value of the imported goods shall be the transaction value adjusted in accordance with the provisions of rule number 10. So addition adjustment are compulsory as per rule number 10. Okay. Now comes to sub rule number 2. This is applicable. This is goods under sub rule number 1 shall be accepted. When that shall be accepted, directly come to point number D. This is the buyer and seller are not related. So that I have already put in the title where the parties are not related. Right. So this is the buyer and seller are not related, or where the buyer and seller are related, the transaction value is acceptable for custom purposes under provision sub rule number 3. So if those are not related, then the valuation is under sub rule number 2. If those are related, so valuation is under sub rule number 3. Okay. So this is sub rule number 1. This is sub rule number 2. And this is sub rule number 3. Okay, so you got the complete structure of rule number 3. In sub rule number 1, it says when it is applicable. In sub rule 2, it says if parties are not related. In sub rule number 3, it says if parties are related, then what happens? Okay, now coming back here. This says sub rule number 2. Read it carefully. This is the value of imported goods under sub rule number 1 shall be accepted provided that. Now the condition. There are 3 conditions given. Number A. There are no restriction as to the disposition or use of the goods by the buyer other than the restriction which. Means there shall not be any condition from the seller as far as the use or disposal of the goods are concerned. Right. So if I am an importer, I am a buyer, if I have purchased the goods, I am not bound by any of the conditions of the seller. But certain conditions are acceptable by law. These are 3 exceptions. These are 3 exceptions. First is these are imposed or required by law of the public authorities in India. So this is not a condition imposed by the seller. This is a condition of law in India. Right. So that will not be considered as a condition. Now you know that whenever there is advance authorization or DFIA, or there is some kind of specific material or SOCAM items, etc., there is the actual user condition applicable. So actual user condition is not imposed by the supplier, that is imposed by the law in India. So any restriction imposed by the law in India, that is always valid. तो उसको आप यहाँ पर कंडीशन में मना नहीं कर सकते, that the use shall not be a condition, because the basic requirement is there shall be no restriction as to the disposition of use. जो सामान इंपोर्ट किया गया है उसको लेकर इंपोर्टर के ऊपर किसी तरह का कोई रेस्ट्रिक्शन लिमिटेशन नहीं होना चाहिए. द वे ही वांट्स टू यूज और द वे ही वांट्स टू डिस्पोज ऑफ, ही शुड बी फ्री टू डू दैट. If that is the situation, right? So what kind of conditions are acceptable? The first condition acceptable is this is the condition imposed by law in India. This is not the conditions by the supplier. Number 2, this says limit the geographical area in which the goods may be resold. So yesterday I gave you example that there is a distributor in India and there is a distributor in every country. So distributor in India is prohibited from making any supplies to the Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, etc. These are nearby countries. So that is geographical limitation. That is acceptable. That is not condition as a limitation. And do not substantially affect the value of the goods. So this is some restriction by which the value is not affected. By which the value is not affected. So quite possible he is imposing a safeguard condition that the useful life of the plant is 10 years. Please ensure that this is not used beyond 10 years. Now, who is going to see that what is going to happen after 10 years? Right. And if you feel that you are working, it is workable, you can go ahead. So there is no substantial effect on the value of the goods. So those kind of conditions are not considered as real conditions. So three conditions are there which are ignored actually. These are three types of conditions. One is condition imposed by law in India, not by the supplier, acceptable. Any condition imposed by the supplier regarding the geographical limit, acceptable. Any condition which does not make a difference in the value, acceptable. Right? So main thing is there shall not be any restriction as to the disposition or use of the goods by the buyer other than restriction which. So these three are not considered as limitation or restrictions. Okay. Number B. The sale or price is not subject to some condition. Hold on. So the second condition, the sale or price is not subject to some condition consideration for which a value cannot be determined in respect to the goods being valued. So by chance, if some condition is imposed by the seller, and because of that, the utility of the product gets restricted, then you cannot determine the correct value. So price will not be acceptable in that situation. Right. What happened? I give you one example. Because again, a long time back story, actual story, that there was one supplier of a plant and machinery to two different people, and the same plant is capable of manufacturing number of articles, number of chemicals. Actually, that was a pharma company. The same plant is capable of manufacturing multiple. Vijay, background music band karo please.
To watch full video, join online batch weekdays 8:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Call Tail Institute.